there's always something to learn, especially when we talk about Roman emperors. And when we talk about them, there's always something very fascinating, very almost laughable about it, but also a moral lesson. Today we are going to talk about one of the very little known, despite it should be like way more important than Nero, way more important than Caligula, probably also than Augustus for different reasons, but one of the very much unknown emperors in ancient Rome, but somebody who deserves all the glory. Not a positive glory, I should say, but some type of glory for sure. Aurelius Lampridius wrote something along the lines of the life of Elagabalus I should never have put into writing, hoping that nobody should know that he was emperor of Rome. Now, already to have that kind of introduction, tells you something. It speaks volume to the type of character we are going to discuss. His name, his popular name, was Elagabalus. Elagabalus was born as Sextus Vespasianus. He belonged to the Severan imperial family, and he was from Syria. Because all the deprivation, and this is not blame, this is more of an objective fact. So the deprivation actually started in Rome, right? I don't want to blame the Syrians for that, or the ancient Syrians for that, but the deprivation started in Rome, but the Syrians heavily contributed to the deprivation in Rome. And I don't mean deprivation as a moral judgment, I mean more sort of like going outside of the standards of Roman decency, the way the Romans perceived their decency to be at, which varied over the course of the time, varied a lot. But the point here is that Elagabalus was just 14 when he ascended to the throne of Rome. Now, the way he did that is already interesting. There was another woman, his great-grandmother, and his great-grandmother was quite somebody. She was the one who infiltrated the Syrian dynasty within the Roman Empire, and her name was Julia Messa. And Julia Messa had a whole history. We may talk about her, a whole different time and episode, but Julia Messa thought, let me see, who can I put onto the throne? And she was like, I don't like Macrinus, it's not a guy that I like. And Macrinus was the actual direct descendant. Elagabalus was more of a cousin to Macrinus, so he didn't have like a very high likelihood to become emperor. But leave it to the Syrian women, who were extremely cunning, to the point that I think that Nero's mother was nobody compared to the Syrian women. Anyway, Julia Messa was like, maybe we should give the throne to Elagabalus. How to do that? Well, we're just gonna spread around the rumors that he is simply the bastard, the illegitimate son of Caracalla. And let's stop right here. Caracalla had a really, really bad end of his life. He was assassinated while on a Syrian road, while he was urinating. That is pretty much how, savage it was at the time to be emperor and to have a bunch of enemies that want to kill you. And that is not like a glorious ending, not the one we would like to read maybe, but not an epic one for sure. But that is how his life ended. And Caracalla is very well known as well for a bunch of different things. But he had extended citizenship to pretty much the Roman Empire, so what else do you expect? He wanted to collect tax, and people did not really like that idea. I wonder why. Anyway, so Caracalla was dead, out of the game, and Macrinus was the sort of emperor at the time, never really managed to become an emperor because Julia Messa started spreading around these rumors on Elagabalus being the illegitimate son, and that's how Elagabalus at 14 was crowned Roman emperor. Now imagine you being a 14 and you will have at that point the whole Praetorian Guards as your personal bodyguard, and you'll have all the Roman Empire as your bank account, all the Roman treasury as your bank account. You would go nuts too. I mean, probably I would go nuts too, even when I was 14, you know. I was pretty conscientious, but you know, you're like the emperor of the Roman Empire. Exactly. So, I mean, I have to say he didn't really go nuts that way. He went like another way. Elagabalus was priest. This is the underestimation of the century. He was the high priest in a Syrian temple, and he would walk around always with fine, silky sort of material, always, you know, with jewelry and a lot of makeup. And the day of the incoronation, that is exactly how he showed up. He showed up with a lot of makeup, a lot of jewelry, a lot of studs and beads here and there, in a very much effeminate way, you know. So if we stop here for a moment and we talk about the ancient Roman empires and the different emperors, we do see a decadence over the centuries. While, you know, corruption is mounting, we do see all of that. We don't really see effeminacy being celebrated in the ancient Roman Empire. The image is, to use a Latin expression, that of pater familias. So it's very patriarchal as a society. It is very masculine. It promotes a certain type of masculinity. Think about all the wars. Think about, you know, all the structure of society. Women did not really matter. That's why they became so important, some of them. You know, because they were the ones that would plot. I mean, not that males would not plot. You know, men would plot pretty much as much as women, but women became very, very cunning in finding their ways to acquire more and more power. And this image of an effeminate, very feminine sort of emperor is something new. We had seen something here and there, but not really to this extent. And when the Romans see that, I mean, the Roman public is probably, you know, entertained by all of it. And to be honest, we don't really know if they were really entertained, because you could imagine that for public displays they were, but you know, when the Roman Empire was not working to its best, probably we have to assume that the Roman public, so to speak, was suffering a lot. And maybe not in Rome per se, but in the Roman Empire for sure, where people would not, you know, watch Elagabalus incarnation on a TV screen. You know, they were more concerned with surviving and put food onto the table, not to die, basically. And he gets crowned that way. We're still at incarnation, amazingly. He gets crowned that way, and that is just the first of a bunch of acts. This would be a 3-year kingdom that for the Senate, for the Roman elite, it's a disaster, to use a word that I really don't like. It's a nightmare. It's a hell of a nightmare, to be honest, right? Because it literally transformed the Senate into an open-air sort of brothel. He would force senators, who again would come from a tradition of very masculine emperors, generals, a little crazy, we have to say, but like very strong and powerful people. He would force them to watch him dance. He would fill whatever room he was in with eunuchs. Eunuchs were just castrated males, again promoting the sort of image of a very effeminate guy. He would fill the room with slaves, which was not uncommon. He would also transform certain rooms more for sexual purposes. Specifically, he's very well known for his orgies, and orgies that would involve men and women, mostly men, however. Orgies that would involve rose petals everywhere. And when I say everywhere, I literally mean that some people were smothered. They died because they were trapped into the amount of rose petals he would fill the rooms with. So it's a nice image on the one hand, and it's not such a nice, depiction on the other hand. Very well known for his libido, and this is like interesting because you have this side which is very effeminate and the other side which is very masculine. The libido is typically associated to that. Very well known for his libido, mostly directed again towards men. Specifically charioteers. Now, charioteers were considered like the low of the low of the low of the layers in society. So to have a physical intercourse with one of them was absolutely scandalous. Worse than, think of any sex scandal involving Schwarzenegger rather than Donald Trump, rather than Berlusconi, rather than Mitterrand. Think of all the sex scandals in politics, and sum them up one by one, and that is pretty much how scandalous it was for a Roman emperor to have sex with a charioteer. And also a couple of things were well known. The first is that he asked doctors to change his genitalia from male genitalia to female feminine genitalia. At the time it was not practiced, so I didn't have much luck with that. The other thing that was extremely well known is that he would choose his personnel on the basis of their genitalia. Now this looks very good on his resume, right? When you go like, I was the emperor, but I chose personnel on the basis of looks, on the basis of sexual traits, rather than competence, rather than expertise. Very loved, in part, by the Roman audience. Why? He was spectacular. In public displays, not so much gladiator games. I don't know personally any gladiator game that happened in that time. It might have happened, but probably we don't know that much from like the sources that we have available. But there were these naval battles. Now, naval battles would not actually happen on sea. That would happen on a square. So usually you would use the Colosseum, fill it with water, like the floor, fill it with water, and that's where, you would have your public display. He chose a square. Not that relevant. But this time around, rather than filling it with water, he filled it up with red wine. Why? Because he wanted to give off that image of, I think, first of all, wealthy emperor, which was extremely important. It was part of the portrayal, right, of an emperor. You had to be wealthy. You actually were wealthy, right? It's more how you spend the money that counted, that counts, but okay. So red wine everywhere in the square. So probably you have to think like there were boundaries, like a certain structure created just for this naval battles to occur. So red wine on the floor, in other words, battles amongst these ships, and red wine signifying the dark sea that Homer describes in the Odyssey. He was not happy with that at all. So that was the first part. Second part was that he raised a chariot drawn by 4 elephants. And of course, what happened during the process is that it devastated a couple of tombs here and there. Then, later on, his chariot, rather than being drawn by 4 elephants, would be drawn by camels. Now, even camels or elephants were not the typical animal used for this job, because they were horses, for a good reason, I would also say. But no, he went ahead and destroyed a couple of tombs. And I will say, the Roman elite was not very happy about it. You can imagine that. Very well known also because of this gift-giving sort of lottery. you would win either nothing, like 10 fleas, 10 hen hacks, sort of like this cheap stuff, but you could also win 10 pounds of gold. I mean, who does that? You could win also animals. Now, we actually don't know if by that the sources mean alive animals or dead animals. But we know somebody won camels. Can you imagine transporting, like putting in your garden, like a bunch of camels in the ancient Roman Empire? With the, like, I don't even know, like, in terms of temperature, like, did this camel survive? How? How do you feed camels, by the way? Like, I don't know. How do you feed camels? That's interesting. I don't know that the Roman, elite or senators or whoever won this was equipped to keep camels in their garden. So it's an amazing thought, though, right? Like, can you imagine? Like, hey, honey, I brought a couple of camels. I don't know. Anyway, either dead or alive, something. Like some piece of animal or a whole animal, alive animal. And then, how did it die? So we have to say, when you were nominated, appointed, when you ascended the throne, you needed to be prepared, especially in those times, to be killed. And also to be killed savagely. In no time, It was enough for the army to think that you were not capable of governing. And I don't know how Elagabalus honestly resisted, like 3 years. 3 years is an incredible amount of time for the Roman Empire and for the Roman army, but he did. And he was prepared to die. He had golden swords, he had poisons all over his bed, next to his bed, whatever. He had a noose also, just in case. And the way he died is by hiding himself in the toilet when he found out they were there to kill him. He was dragged through the streets of Rome and thrown into the river. And after that, of course, there was damnatio memoriae. And damnatio memoriae is a Latin expression that means he was erased from everywhere. From the coins, his statues were put down. There was no longer trace of him. Now, the only question we have left is this all true? Well, you have to imagine that there are 3 major sources for his personal biography. 2 of them also had indirect sources. So, rumors that would spread even after, in memory of this emperor, of the craziness of this emperor. So some things might have blown out of proportion. But you also have to assume that this is a pretty fair and accurate account somehow. It's not unbelievable. It is actually feasible that the Syrians imported, I'm blaming the Syrians, I'm sorry, that, the Syrian dynasty, arrived in Rome, imported all of that, and also exploited all the decadence that was present in Rome even before the Syrians. So you have to assume that some of this is true. There's one source that is more objective, but it's kind of like reporting the same type of sort of information. And maybe some are just rumors, to counterbalance this effeminate image. But there must have been something fairly accurate in the portrait we have given of him, in thinking that he was just like a very young boy when he became emperor. And even at a certain point, even Julia Mesa, his great-grandmother, wanted him out of the kingdom, right? He was not giving power to anybody but himself, which is typical. I mean, 14 years old. Though at the time 14 years old were kind of like adults. Anyway guys, I want to hear your thoughts. I hope you have enjoyed this video. So let me know, comment below. And if you have enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll talk next time in a new episode. Bye!